Your fantasy football playoffs are coming fast, and in this video, I'm breaking down the 10 players who can basically win your league on their own. They're not surprise names, they're players whose roles are peaking at the perfect time and whose fantasy playoff schedules make them almost an unfair advantage. These are guys that I've been telling you to trade for weeks for this exact stretch of games. True must-haves for the fantasy playoffs this year. So if you've got these players on your roster heading into the postseason, you're already way ahead of your competition. And it starts with Saquon Barkley, specifically the playoff schedule for the Eagles. Top 3 edge here for everyone that has them. He faces the Raiders, Commanders, and Bills in weeks 15 through 17. That is the third best running back playoff schedule in the entire league. All three of these defenses are very vulnerable to the run, giving Saquon the cleanest runway that he's had all year. And again, we're kind of looking for these first type of players as the ones that are obviously studs. These are guys that are probably very difficult to acquire in trades as we approach the playoffs, but the schedule is really where everything kind of swings in Saquon's favor here, and it's really a direct invitation for a late season surge when he's basically underperformed from an efficiency standpoint most of the season. The thing that's interesting here is that there's kind of a little bit of a hidden volume spike here for Saquon that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. He's been used in the passing game way more recently, and that's something that we haven't really seen from him historically as he's been with the Eagles. So in week 12, Barkley posted 7 receptions, his highest target involvement game as an Eagle, first time clearing 5 targets since he was a Giant, which is crazy to say, but I had to double check that one. Week 11, 26 carries. That's his heaviest rushing workload of the season. So he's a top 3 guy in snap share while kind of sitting on the outside in like the top 50 in points per opportunity. So this is like the classic volume greater than production like tension point that could be ready to flip with some really strong matchups like we have coming into the fantasy playoffs. So I've been talking about trying to trade for Saquon for weeks now. The expanded pass game role was something that caught me even by surprise for sure. But even if the production has been kind of subpar, that's really just the opening here for Saquon to completely explode. He's failed to clear 60 rushing yards in 4 straight games. That's the longest slump of his Eagles tenure. He still has kind of like these flashes though. The offensive line injuries were definitely something that suppressed his efficiency all season. So you're not really buying into the slump here. What you're buying is that the inefficiency regression window is kind of perfectly aligned with the easiest running back stretch of the season for Saquon. So I think what we have to ask ourselves here is what happens when elite volume finally meets a friendly schedule. We get this top 3 playoff running back schedule. Again, Raiders, Commanders, Bills. And then again, we get a nice little usage spike here, 26 carries, the 7 catch game. And the defense has been playing a lot better as well. So hopefully we get some nice game script here. Barkley is still the running back 11 despite his disappointment so far. So the floor is already a lot higher, I think, than people realize. If Saquon is going to be this involved during the worst efficiency stretch of the year, then weeks 15 through 17 could be the moment when the breakout finally aligns and Saquon is a true league winner for the fantasy playoffs. Another guy that we've been talking about all year, I think a lot of you probably have him because we had him ranked significantly higher in the preseason rankings, but Devon Achane. Again, he's the complete engine of Miami's offense right now. Back-to-back 20-plus carry games for the first time of his entire career. 21 for 120 in Week 11, 22 for 174 in Week 10. And why that matters is Miami has officially chosen him as their offensive centerpiece right now. He's led the Dolphins in receptions Week 11, nearly led them in total yards as well. So why that matters for this is really just the dual threat usage that he's going to get and really just a bulletproof fantasy floor. So at least 91 yards from scrimmage in 4 straight games before the Week 12 bye. Volume plus efficiency is going to give him a little bit more stability even when Miami is struggling as a team. So with Tyreek Hill out earlier in the season, he's really operated as like a top 3 pass catcher in this offense. So why that matters is really just the role expands when Miami needs a playmaker. So he's the most explosive back in football. I don't think it's necessarily close for someone that doesn't get near as much love as he should. And I think the long scores that you get from him, obviously big scores, long scores, 59-yard, 35-yard touchdowns versus Buffalo. He can basically give you an edge in any matchup in the fantasy playoffs in one play. And those type of like league winner, like actual matchup winning type of players, there's only a few of them in the league that you can grab. And we happen to get just an absolute great matchup run here as well for Miami. The production has been good despite the chaos so far, but now we're going to get like an absolute playoff hammer here. So what we have to ask ourselves is what happens when the NFL's most explosive running back gets one of the easiest fantasy playoff schedules there is. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay. So that's the 5th most favorable running back playoff schedule. So the Bengals are allowing the most points to running backs as well. Bucks 6th most allowed. So the home run skill set that we have is going to meet just the soft matchups down the stretch when it really matters. And I think this is a situation too where we're starting to get even more volume than we've ever had for him. So he's not just a playoff sleeper, I guess is not the right word, but a guy that isn't being talked about as like a top 3 option, maybe a top 5 option in some people's eyes. But in my eyes, he's a true league winner that's hiding in plain sight. So he's the most explosive running back in football at times, and he walks in to one of the best matchup stretches of the entire season. So you're not overthinking it. I think that these two guys are guys that could be winning championships for people, and a couple names that maybe are a tier down from where some people's eyes may be at like the top of the running back spectrum for this year so far. Let's talk about Bucky Irving. So obviously this injury for Baker Mayfield definitely matters, but Bucky Irving, running back 1 usage before the injury, he handled 25 carries in week 3, ran a route on 23 of 38 dropbacks in week 1. So he's another confirmed dual threat workload type of player. He's averaged 71 rushing yards plus 50 receiving yards in the last couple games that he's been out there. So the early season yardage floor is something that a lot of people are forgetting about just because he hasn't played since week 7. So he's already proven that he can have that bell cow usage on the ground and through the air, the exact profile that explodes in December when the legs kind of get heavy across the league. The passing game usage is definitely the cheat code here, though. 5 balls, 102 yards, and a touchdown in week 4 while being targeted on 34% of his routes. Really elite pass game domination that no one else in this backfield can touch when he's healthy. So in December, the pass catching running backs are what really wins championships in PPR leagues, but also Irving has already proven that he can rack up receiving yards in bunches, make big plays as well. Again, another back that has just an absolutely amazing schedule in the playoffs. So the fantasy playoffs, I should say. Falcons, Panthers, Dolphins, second most favorable fantasy playoff schedule for running backs in weeks 15 through 17. Both Atlanta and Carolina are in the 5 easiest running back schedule, tier. So massive production bump for this position overall. Tampa Bay's running back schedule grades out really well as well. So there's a couple good spots here and a couple elite spots here, basically. So if Irving doesn't just like return value here, I would be shocked if he's healthy, if he isn't a big part of winning teams. So in some ways, the injury is obviously a negative. In other ways, he's kind of fresh coming into like some of the most important weeks of the year for fantasy. So it's a little bit of a perfect storm. He's a proven dual threat running back walking into an easy playoff schedule, but he's also fresh. So that could be a combination that could be a league winner for fantasy playoffs. Derrick Henry, another guy I think we've been screaming about for weeks to grab him. Obviously, he gets 2 touchdowns last week, 21 carries. He has 18 plus carries in 6 straight games. Really what I think is not being talked about as well is how poor Lamar has been since he's come back from injury. He's been taking sacks at a crazy rate. He clearly just doesn't look fully healthy. So what we're getting from Derrick Henry is we're going to get obviously a little bit of weather coming up, but also the touch counts keep going up. And again, 4 straight since Lamar's return, they've actually won these games, and Lamar hasn't even played especially well. So they beat the Browns, the Vikings, and the Jets. So they have a functioning offense again, locked in red zone chances, again, can lead to these multiple touchdown games pretty easily for guys like Derrick Henry. The matchup get even softer when it matters. Again, we keep talking about the Bengals, but week 15, the Ravens get the Bengals, and then they get the Patriots and the Packers. So this schedule is the 7th best running back playoff schedule, and the big problem this year has really been efficiency for Henry. We haven't really seen some of those big plays, but these are the type of defenses that could inflate running back production. So the ceiling is definitely still intact every time Baltimore gets like a positive game script as well, which should be relatively frequently. He does have 3 100-yard games this season, weeks 1, 6, and 11. Those are all tied directly to competitive or positive game script games. So Baltimore has scored 23-plus points in 4 straight, and it's been a complete reversal from the offense had without Lamar, even though Lamar doesn't look fully healthy. So I think that while Henry's production is somewhat script dependent, the Ravens are suddenly controlling in every game that they're in right now. So I think the question is what happens if Henry gets like 3 straight neutral or better games. He's already shown these spike weeks, 117 yards, 119 yards, 103 yards, and then again, a couple multi-touchdown performances as well. The exact same offense that he's been crushing as well over the last few years now. So I think you combine that with like the 2 like top 5 playoff matchups, and then this offense will continue to stay stable with Lamar. And when the matchups kind of tilt in Henry's favor, he's got legitimate week winning upside, league winning upside, hiding in kind of like a volatile season. I think for Derrick Henry, he's not getting as much love as he should. Another guy that feels like he's kind of been ignored is Trey Benson. So obviously before the injury, he was the running back one for Arizona the moment that James Conner went down. 15 touches in week 4, got a bunch of targets as well, 5-6 targets. So when he's active, he's immediately going to be the true 3-down back. They haven't really been able to find that option without him. Amari Demercado, all of these guys, right? I don't think that they're going to get near as much of the passing game involvement and the early down looks as well. And I think that the context here is that the team's intent was pretty clear that he was the starter before the knee injury. We haven't seen that with any other Cardinals back since he's been out. And again, similar to Bucky Irving, fresh legs for the easiest running back playoff schedule. The Cardinals have the easiest projected running back playoff schedule. They also have the Bengals. So Falcons, Bengals, and Texans in week 15. So that's the tough one. If you can get through the Texans, if you can get through the Texans, you get the Falcons and the Bengals in week 16 and 17 when it really matters. So the Falcons have also allowed the 4th most points per game to opposing running backs. And I think the Bengals are like the worst matchup by far in this stretch, but it's basically getting them in week 17. If you can get to the Fantasy Championship and you have Trey Benson, he's probably going to project like a top 5 guy. So coaches are already kind of projecting him to be like the starter immediately for this stretch run. And I think why that kind of matters is the Cardinals see him as like their finisher, not just like a rotational piece like we've had in Arizona the last few weeks. So I think we get basically the returning lead back in one of the softest playoff schedules in the NFL. So I think once he already had, I guess what he given us right before the injury has already shown me all that I need to see to really give him and like set him up as a league-winning RB1 the rest of the way and kind of the moment that championships are decided. So we've talked about 5 running backs. We're going to talk about 5 wide receivers. To recap, Trey Benson, Derrick Henry, Bucky Irving, Devon Achane, and Saquon Barkley. If you have any of those guys on your roster, you're going to be in a really good spot from a matchup perspective and a league-winning must-have perspective the rest of the way in the fantasy playoffs. Let's talk about a name I don't think you guys are going to like. Justin Jefferson. Hear me out. So if we can figure out what's going on at quarterback here, right? Justin Jefferson has the number 1 playoff wide receiver schedule in fantasy. Cowboys, Giants, Lions. This is the cleanest runway any elite wide receiver gets. Every matchup boosts wide receiver output aggressively, right? So these are all matchups where bad quarterback play can be masked a little bit. I think we're going to get a potential shootout in week 17 with the Lions as well. And the one thing that we can hold our hat on here is that the volume never went away for JJ. So he's had still a pretty massive target floor, even when J.J. McCarthy has been struggling. Hasn't had the efficiency, of course, but if they can start to figure things out a little bit, we'll see if McCarthy gets back out there with that concussion that he's working through right now. But maybe it's even better to get someone else in there, some other fresh eyes. McCarthy is probably the problem, but the matchups might fix the problem. We'll see. Jefferson's dips are QB driven right now and not talent driven. We know that. So meaning the schedule relief is like uniquely powerful for him. So I think that the deep chunk plays that we've been leaving on the field, those are ones that we could get in these better matchups. So I think when an elite wide receiver gets the best playoff wide receiver schedule in football, he's someone that we have to be paying a lot of attention to going into the stretch run. Jalen Waddle. We talked about these Miami matchups for Achane. A lot of that is going to funnel to Jalen Waddle as well. He's been seeing massive volume with no Tyreek, 35% target share in week 11. The offense basically ran through him once again. He's been absolutely cooking since Tyreek Hill has been out with that season-ending injury. And realistically, I think you're getting the undisputed alpha who's already commanded pretty elite usage when Miami has no choice but to feed him. So we're kind of looking at a little bit of QB volatility here as well with Tua, but he has been forcing some deep shots to Waddle, including multiple plays that should have probably been intercepted in the last game, but the volume stayed sky high, and we're getting a lot of those deep targets as well. So I think we're going to get, if we can get some floor with this quarterback play, I think the ceiling is definitely still intact with some weekly splash plays that we've been able to see. And the efficiency for Waddle has been pretty sicky overall. So he's cleared 80 yards in 5 of the 6 games with Tyreek out. The volume and efficiency spiked pretty much simultaneously there. So not just earning targets, he's producing like those chunk plays that we need every single week, and we definitely need in the fantasy playoffs. But again, buried the lead. Miami has the 4th easiest wide receiver playoff schedule. They get the Steelers, Bengals, and the Bucks. All 3 defenses boost wide receiver scoring pretty aggressively. The Steelers, the 2nd most points allowed to wide receivers. The Bengals are basically dominated everywhere. and the Bucks are kind of like they're always in like consistent shootouts at least. So the Dolphins defense is also kind of collapsing. So we'll get like some more pass heavy scripts here that funnel even more volume towards the wide receiver one overall in this offense. And if Waddle's already commanding wide receiver one volume in a broken offense, what happens if he walks into 3 straight games with kind of like green light matchups? So you're starting to see how he could be a league winning wide receiver one who basically isn't being talked about as one. So the playoff schedule is basically a cheat code here. So someone that is obviously elite, but again, we're talking about tiers, right? And playoff tiers. A lot of you guys have some playoff pools coming up. There's obviously a bunch of different contests out there where you can almost redraft for the playoffs alone. I think we have to put Amon-Ra in the top tier at wide receiver as well. The alpha volume has obviously never left. And I think that even last week, right? 149 yards, a touchdown, 9 of 13 targets versus the Giants. And then Goff kind of missed him on a few as well. He could have had 2 TDs in this game. So when Sam Laporta was ruled out for the rest of the year, St. Brown is the one that basically took on all of those targets. He was a little bit overshadowed in this last game by how good Jahmyr Gibbs was, but he's seen 7+ targets in every single game since week 1, except 1. So that was against the Eagles. His weekly floor is basically insulated, despite when Detroit has struggled. So we get the red zone dominance. He has 7 touchdowns by week 7, which was crazy. He was leading the NFL at one point. If it wasn't for like what Davante Adams has done around the goal line, we'd be talking about the red zone dominance for Amon-Ra so far this year. So even in tough matchups, he's still been leading the team in targets consistently. He had 10 targets against the Chiefs. The defensive style, it's just really tough to take a guy like this away that can move all over the field and play in the slot. He's been almost bulletproof in terms of the volume and his ability to earn targets, but also earn a lot of high leverage targets as well. So again, what happens when an elite wide receiver gets the 3rd best playoff schedule? Weeks 15 through 17, Rams, Steelers, Vikings. 3rd most favorable wide receiver schedule. And it's the exact combination that you kind of need to chase with your elite wide receivers in some of these top heavy tournaments that we'll have for the playoffs. And then really just you're going to get league leading touchdown usage through the first 7 weeks. And then you get a consolidated route tree now that Laporta is out in an amazing spot from a matchup perspective as well. Amon-Ra, I would not be shocked if he's the wide receiver one overall in the fantasy playoffs. Wan'Dale Robinson. So we're going down a tier here, obviously, but we have seen basically a wide receiver level volume spike for Robinson. 11+ targets in 3 of his last 4 healthy games, including a 32% route target rate in week 12. So he's really had top tier alpha usage in this offense. And why that matters is that level of guaranteed volume is really just the most reliable league winning trait when it comes to the fantasy playoffs, but also wide receivers. So the schedule turns into a bit of a cheat code here as well. The Giants playoff stretch: Commanders, Vikings, Raiders. This is the 2nd most favorable wide receiver schedule, and New York is classified as one of the top situations for targets that are available. So high floor usage plus elite defensive matchups gives him a runway to absolutely smash in weeks 15 through 17. And he's really been someone that has produced even through some quarterback chaos, right? 156 yards and a TD on 14 targets in week 12, led the team in targets for multiple weeks, and has continued to earn volume no matter who the quarterback is, Dart, Wilson, or Winston. And if he produces through that type of instability, the easier playoff defenses are only going to raise his ceiling, is my thought. So he might be one of the sneakier league-winning wide receivers. He's already kind of the de facto wide receiver one since Neighbors went down, and the target share has been pretty locked in. One of the easiest wide receiver playoff schedules. So if you want guaranteed volume, a guy who can hit massive target ceiling games, weeks 15 through 17, Wan'Dale is probably one of the cleanest league-winning playoff plays on the entire board. Not the cleanest play on the board, but the upside is there. Let's talk about A.J. Brown. He's been heating up when it matters most. So he had a season-high 8 catches for 110 yards and a touchdown in week 12. That's his most receptions all year and just 11 yards shy of his season high. Why that matters, again, he's proven this current form. It's really been, can we continue to get him the ball consistently in these games where they don't throw a ton? So he's been targeted on 23% of his routes in week 12. We got a usage spike there after some weeks of volatility, I will say, on and off the field. So the route level volume, we've gotten sticky, bankable usage, and we've kind of already seen that he's starting to seem a little bit more satisfied and that the role issues were certainly real. And I think the correction has kind of started here. So the volume spikes directly after him kind of speaking up, public frustration, all of that. And the teams responded, right? The squeaky wheel getting fed here a little bit. 7 of 11 catches in week 11. despite working kind of the short areas versus the Detroit secondary. So the hamstring return, and I mean, realistically, I think all narratives and turbulence, I think, is behind him, and the team is committed to winning this point of the season. Obviously, good for us as well from fantasy perspective. So the proven ceiling still exists underneath this chaos. We saw that last week, even in a down year. Still elite usage. The floor never truly cratered. So this is kind of one of the easiest fantasy playoff schedules. And I think realistically, a receiver that's finally heating up at the right time is always going to be interesting. The Eagles have like weeks 15 through 17, one of the easiest fantasy wide receiver schedules. The playoff opponents, Raiders, Commanders, Bills, seventh most favorable in terms of wide receiver matchups. So he's already kind of been delivering the season best production before entering a soft wide receiver playoff schedule. And AJ Brown profiles as a top tier elite league winner for the fantasy playoffs. Obviously, he has all the skill in the world. We just need to have that situation where the volume kind of meets that efficiency. And if we can get that, we've got a smash spot here. So that's the full list of must-have players that you need on your roster for the fantasy playoffs. If you've got even a couple of these guys, you're already in a great spot to win your league this year.